to dissolve my church. My son has turned to me and said that he is ashamed of me that I choose to associate with the Unification Church, even though that may cost him to lose his friendships and future opportunities. If the church is dissolved, our children could be taken away and counseled to reject their beliefs and families. I ask the international community of faith to pressure Japan to recognize their wrongdoings in attacking our religion and apologize for the fear and harm inflicted on our families. Together, let us stand for religious freedom and the right to raise our children with faith. Thank you.
I'm Tamami Muzoe, a second-generation member of the Family Federation, born through the blessing marriage ceremony of our church. Shortly after the ceremony, my father was kidnapped and forced to abandon his faith. He risked his life to escape captivity and be reunited with my mother, which resulted in my birth on this earth. To criticize our blessing ceremony is to deny my own origins and identity. Living in Japan, I see so much biased media coverage about our church.
I've been disappointed by the mainstream media, who many times would be willing to broadcast and spread content against my church, while hardly letting the voices of Family Federation members get out to the public. I'm alarmed how multiple media outlets have been featuring a nasty anti-cult activist, Mr. Eito Suzuki. This man has described members of the Family Federation as mentally deranged lunatics, as well as cockroaches in their breeding season. I feel that the media featuring hateful people like him will foster hatred rather than understanding towards religious minorities.
Our local youth group has been serving our community in a various volunteer project for about 20 years. Last year, we were asked to quietly withdraw our participation in the international fair just because of our connection with the Family Federation. The organizer even told us that we were not allowed to join another fair, despite of our many years of trustworthy cooperation. We were really shocked and hurt because we were treated as unworthy and suspicious people. We were even deprived of the right to do good deeds.
I'm involved with the youth group for the middle school and high school students for one of the churches here in Japan. At the time of the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, some students shared with me their experiences at school. Teachers would tell their classrooms to be cautious of the Unification Church, of getting brainwashed by their followers. Many of the students in my youth group grew anxiety from being unable to share freely about themselves, for fear that once they do expose their ties with the Unification Church, they would be outcasted.
The Japanese government is tearing my world apart. My church has no criminal record, and yet the government is determined to dissolve my church. My son has turned to me and said that he is ashamed of me that I choose to associate with the Unification Church, even though that may cost him to lose his friendships and future opportunities. If the church is dissolved, our children could be taken away and counseled to reject their beliefs and families. I ask the international community of faith to pressure Japan to recognize their wrongdoings in attacking our religion and apologize for the fear and harm inflicted on our families. Together, let us stand for religious freedom and the right to raise our children with faith. Thank you.
I'm Tamami Muzoe, a second-generation member of the Family Federation, born through the blessing marriage ceremony of our church. Shortly after the ceremony, my father was kidnapped and forced to abandon his faith. He risked his life to escape captivity and be reunited with my mother, which resulted in my birth on this earth. To criticize our blessing ceremony is to deny my own origins and identity. Living in Japan, I see so much biased media coverage about our church.
I've been disappointed by the mainstream media, who many times would be willing to broadcast and spread content against my church, while hardly letting the voices of Family Federation members get out to the public. I'm alarmed how multiple media outlets have been featuring a nasty anti-cult activist, Mr. Eito Suzuki. This man has described members of the Family Federation as mentally deranged lunatics, as well as cockroaches in their breeding season. I feel that the media featuring hateful people like him will foster hatred rather than understanding towards religious minorities.
Our local youth group has been serving our community in a various volunteer project for about 20 years. Last year, we were asked to quietly withdraw our participation in the international fair just because of our connection with the Family Federation. The organizer even told us that we were not allowed to join another fair, despite of our many years of trustworthy cooperation. We were really shocked and hurt because we were treated as unworthy and suspicious people. We were even deprived of the right to do good deeds.
I'm involved with the youth group for the middle school and high school students for one of the churches here in Japan. At the time of the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, some students shared with me their experiences at school. Teachers would tell their classrooms to be cautious of the Unification Church, of getting brainwashed by their followers. Many of the students in my youth group grew anxiety from being unable to share freely about themselves, for fear that once they do expose their ties with the Unification Church, they would be outcasted.
The Japanese government is tearing my world apart. My church has no criminal record, and yet the government is determined to dissolve my church. My son has turned to me and said that he is ashamed of me, that I choose to associate with the Unification Church, even though that may cost him to lose his friendships and future opportunities. If the church is dissolved, our children could be taken away and counseled to reject their beliefs and families. I ask the international community of faith to pressure Japan to recognize their wrongdoings in attacking our religion and apologize for the fear and harm inflicted on our families. Together, let us stand for religious freedom and the right to raise our children with faith. Thank you.
I'm Tamami Muzoe, a second-generation member of the Family Federation, born through the blessing marriage ceremony of our church. Shortly after the ceremony, my father was kidnapped and forced to abandon his faith. He risked his life to escape captivity and be reunited with my mother, which resulted in my birth on this earth. To criticize our blessing ceremony is to deny my own origins and identity. Living in Japan, I see so much biased media coverage about our church.
I've been disappointed by the mainstream media, who many times would be willing to broadcast and spread content against my church while hardly letting the voices of Family Federation members get out to the public. I'm alarmed how multiple media outlets have been featuring a nasty anti-cult activist, Mr. Eito Suzuki. This man has described members of the Family Federation as mentally deranged lunatics, as well as cockroaches in their breeding season. I feel that the media featuring hateful people like him will foster hatred rather than understanding towards religious minorities.
Our local youth group has been serving our community in a various volunteer project for about 20 years. Last year, we were asked to quietly withdraw our participation in the international fair just because of our connection with the Family Federation. The organizer even told us that we were not allowed to join another fair, despite of our many years of trustworthy cooperation. We were really shocked and hurt because we were treated as unworthy and suspicious people. We were even deprived of the right to do good deeds.
I'm involved with the youth group for the middle school and high school students for one of the churches here in Japan. At the time of the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, some students shared with me their experiences at school. Teachers would tell their classrooms to be cautious of the Unification Church, of getting brainwashed by their followers. Many of the students in my youth group grew anxiety from being unable to share freely about themselves, for fear that once they do expose their ties with the Unification Church, they would be outcasted.
up in the morning feeling tired. Sometimes we feel good. Sometimes.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the IRF Religious Freedom Dinner, hosted by the Washington Times Foundation and the Universal Peace Federation. Religious leaders will come forward to honor our Creator God. The faith leaders gather to pray in silence, pouring water from their vessels into a common bowl, representing our heartfelt cooperation in support of religious freedom for all. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the IRF Religious Freedom Dinner, hosted by the Washington Times Foundation and the Universal Peace Federation. Religious leaders will come forward to honor our Creator God. The faith leaders gather to pray in silence, pouring water from their vessels into a common bowl, representing our heartfelt cooperation in support of religious freedom for all. Thank you to our religious leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our IRF Summit co-chairs, Dr. Katrina Lantos-Sweat and Ambassador Sam Brownback. And welcome our hosts, Dr. Michael Jenkins, President of Universal Peace Federation, and Mr. Thomas McDevitt, Chairman of the Washington Times.
Thank you. Thank you. What a beautiful first day, don't you think? It's been really, I think, overwhelming to me, the stories and the individuals that I'm hearing. And what has really been encouraging so much is to see the depth of relationship building that's taken place. Now that we've done this for several years, some of you have been back, there are new people that are coming into it, but the relationships deepen and deepen, and that allows us to do more and more on this topic, and it's moving forward so strong. And I'm excited for this dinner this evening, and for the Vice President of the United States to be here tomorrow, which is a big recognition of the importance of this topic. Welcome this evening. Have a great dinner.
Thank you. It's such a joy for me to be with all of you tonight. As Ambassador Brownback said, this has been a phenomenal start to the IRF Summit 2025. And this dinner, organized by our friends at the Washington Times Foundation, is always one of the highlights of this special gathering. I think we have to acknowledge that it's a reflection of the stature and importance of this IRF Summit, that just a few days into the new administration, the Vice President of the United States is making time to join us tomorrow. So that is really a very exciting development.
Yeah.
I also just want to say that this lovely ceremony we just witnessed with all the various faith communities pouring their water together into that shared bowl really has distilled in a beautifully symbolic way what the IRF Summit is all about. Coming together in unity, sharing our faith, and combining forces to defend the rights of all of us. So thank you for having us tonight. Thank you for being here, and let the celebrations continue.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Washington, and congratulations to Ambassador Brownback and Dr. Katrina Lantos-Sweat, Dr. Jenkins, and everyone involved with IRF. I think the key word of the time we're in, if it's going to be a golden era, golden age, or even a diamond era, is freedom. And the essence of freedom is religious freedom, but the flip side of that is responsibility and the role of citizens and leaders like yourself. Thank you so much for being here today, and let's radiate the wisdom that we share in this program throughout the world. God bless you, and thank you so much.
Welcome, everyone, and we are so excited to be here with the International Religious Freedom Summit again. And I want to thank Dr. Katrina Lantos Sweat and also Ambassador Sam Brownback, our co-chairman. Let's give them a round of applause. They've been doing this for years now, and this, you can see it's expanding so rapidly. One thing we want to convey is that we are here to help all faith communities. We believe that if we combine together and we unite together with love and heart and concern for our fellow man and woman, we can overcome the challenges of persecution throughout the world. If we all come together as one, we will win together as one, and every faith, every race, every religion and culture will be lifted up and protected, and religious freedom will rise. God bless you. Thank you. Thank you, Tom McDivitt, the Washington Times. Thank you.
As we meet today, the religious freedoms of millions of believers are being violated globally, from Asia to Africa, in Europe and the Americas. People of faith need and deserve widespread support to preserve this vital human right to worship as they choose. In our polarized world, extremist ideologies and totalitarian regimes threaten freedom of religion and thought. Autocrats insist that the state must be the ultimate authority. Therefore, they will not tolerate belief in a higher power. History shows that when people of faith are denied their God-given right of religious freedom, they suffer persecution, violence, and even genocide. Since the 1979 revolution, Iran's 300,000 Baha'is have experienced widespread systematic persecution, reaching all aspects of life, with over 200 Baha'is executed, including 10 women hanged in Shiraz, and continuing with the targeting of Baha'i women who are prisoners in Iran today. 2/3 of Baha'i prisoners in Iran are women. Police raids, beatings, destruction of cemeteries and holy places, and property seizures are commonplace. Terrorism and ethno-religious violence within Nigeria have produced nearly 1.8 million refugees in their own country. Whole villages have been decimated. Lawrence Zongo has led efforts to rescue and empower the women. 100 women were captured by Boko Haram over 10 years ago. Leah Sharibu is the one remaining because she refuses to give up her Christian faith. Dr. Gloria Puldu created a foundation to save her. Despite this grim reality, there is hope. Many are standing up for religious liberty around the world. The Washington Times Foundation and the Universal Peace Federation are honored to join the IRF Summit, co-chaired by Ambassador Sam Brownback and Dr. Katrina Lantos Sweat. The Washington Times has brought great attention to this important cause. Together with the IRF partners, we are calling on all faith communities to rise up and defend the freedom of all religions. Our collective efforts are moving the United States, the United Nations, and all free nations to fulfill their most critical role to advance, protect, and defend religious freedom. Religious freedom is the bedrock for all freedoms. Universal Peace Federation convenes leaders from all sectors of the world and all levels of leadership to seek peace based on interfaith cooperation and religious freedom. Every continent has serious challenges to religious freedom. Every faith suffers persecution throughout the world and needs our support.
Freedom of religion is freedom of thought and is an essential foundation of democracy alongside the freedoms of speech and assembly.
Freedom of religion can never be taken for granted. It must always be defended and looked after.
Our hope is in God and the cooperation of all people. All nations, especially leading democracies, need to be vigilant to protect and preserve religious freedom. Democracies are usually seen as defenders of religious freedom. However, serious questions have been raised that Japan may be violating its covenant with the United Nations to protect religious freedom. In 2024, 4 United Nations rapporteurs issued a strong UN mandate, raising concerns that Japan is violating the Human Rights Declaration on Freedom of Religion, which has caused direct hate crimes against the Jehovah's Witness and the Family Federation. The UN rapporteur's request to visit Japan to review the situation has still not been granted. Dissolving a religion that has not violated any criminal law, according to the State Department's 2023 report on Japan, is a deviation from the norm. The danger is that this encourages other nations to violate religious freedom. Citing Japan as an example to be followed, several African states have passed regulations allowing for quick dissolution of churches perceived as antisocial. In Rwanda, 7,700 churches were shut down in 2024. However, as we speak, many international religious freedom leaders are challenging the religious liberty crisis in Japan. We want to help Japan overcome this crisis. To protect religious freedom, we need to uphold common, universal values. Religious freedom is the universally shared value embraced by all faiths and people of conscience. Because we have come together as partners at this historic summit, we can and will roll back the persecution of all faiths. We'll make sure all nations respect the freedom of all faiths. Let us work together to achieve lasting religious freedom throughout the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Paris, human rights attorney Patricia Duval.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. When I started defending the Japanese Unification Church some 12 years ago, I was told about the deprogramming of its believers that was recurrently occurring in Japan. Numerous accounts were given of families abducting and confining their kin until they would recant their faith for months, sometimes for years. Some professional deprogrammers would step in during confinement to forcefully persuade the believers that the Unification Church beliefs were contrary to the Bible. This practice, which reminds us of heresy trials and persecutions, was done with a tacit approval and refusal to intervene from the authorities, be it police or justice. Around 4,300 believers were subjected to deprogramming over 40 years in Japan. After being requested by the United Nations Human Rights Committee in 2014 to put an end to this practice, Japan pursued its fight against the Church in a reinvented form. The fruits of deprogramming are now being harvested by state authorities through the accumulation of tort cases initiated by deprogrammed members against the Church to reach the final goal of its dissolution. Who made all that happen? The Network of Lawyers Against Spiritual Sales, an association of far-left and atheistic obedience lawyers with the stated purpose of eliminating the Unification Church due to its early stance against communism. Those lawyers, who were sometimes advising families to resort to deprogramming in the first place, incited the members who finally recanted their faith and their families to sue the Church for damages. With their reasoning based on consumer law, they persuaded the courts to consider religious donations as commercial matters and the soliciting of donations as quote-unquote evangelical brainwashing. Following the shooting of Prime Minister Abe in July 2022 by a man who resented Abe's sympathy for the church, scapegoating and hate speech flourished in the media. Riding this wave, the government filed for dissolution of the church, alleging that it had caused serious harm to public welfare due to the various tort cases it had lost. In all these adverse tort rulings, the courts based their decisions on an alleged violation of social norms. But what are social norms in the area of religious beliefs and practices? In a country where materialistic and atheistic lobbies are at work? Well, the social norms in Japan today include where official guidelines are issued for the protection of children and mention that making a child participate to religious activities is a form of child abuse. Alerted by the Jehovah's Witnesses, 4 UN special rapporteurs have issued an open letter to the Japanese authorities to express their concern about those guidelines. Now, based on biased tort cases, the Japanese authorities fight for dissolution of the church, accusing it of having seriously harmed public welfare. But the UN Human Rights Committee has consistently urged Japan to stop using public welfare as a justification to limit freedom of religion or belief. Now, the government went further to enact a new law to criminalize so-called unjust solicitation of donations, which sanctions the vague and arbitrary concept of infringement of free will. This law has been announced as being especially designed for the Unification Church, but it could undoubtedly be applied against other targeted denominations in the future. Now, this situation needs urgent attention. Japan is a beautiful and liberal country, but it needs to be reminded of its commitments to respect freedom of religion or belief. Thank you for your attention.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Reverend Tomohiro Tanaka, President of the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification in Japan, translating Mr. Shunsuke Uotani, Secretary General, UPF-Japan.
はじめに、ワシントン近郊で1月29日に起きた航空機事故の犠牲者に対して深い哀悼の意を表します。
First of all, I'd like to express my deepest condolences to the victims of the plane crash that occurred near Washington, D.C. on January 29th.
IRF サミット2025で日本の世界平和統一家庭連合を代表しお話しできることを光栄に思います。
It is an honor to speak on behalf of Family Federation for World Peace and Unification Japan at the IRF Summit 2025.
しかし本日、私は民主主義国家である日本で起こっている魔女狩り的宗教弾圧について話さなければならないことを大変に残念に思います。
Today, I'm deeply saddened to have to speak about the witch hunt-like religious persecution that is taking place in Japan, a democratic nation.
ご存知のように、私たち家庭連合は安倍晋三元首相殺害事件後、メディアと、そして政府から激しい攻撃を受けてきました。
As you know, the Family Federation has come under intense attack from the media and government following the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
そして、歪んだ報道に屈した岸田前首相は、家庭連合との関係断絶を宣言し、解散命令請求を裁判所に出したのでございます。
Then, succumbing to the distorted media reporting, former Prime Minister Kishida declared that he was severing tie with the Family Federation and filed a request in court for a dissolution order.
2022年の安倍首相暗殺事件以降、家庭連合の会員たちは大きな苦しみの中におります。
Since the assassination of Prime Minister Abe in 2022, members of the Family Federation have been experiencing great suffering.
私は日本政府は越えてはならない一線を越えたと思っております。事実、家庭連合は解散理由になる刑事事件を一件も起こしたことがありません。
I believe that the Japanese government has crossed a line that should never be crossed. The fact is that the Family Federation has not committed any criminal offenses that could be ground for dissolution.
それで岸田前首相は解散命令の理由に民法による不法行為を持ち込みました。この判断は一夜にして彼によって決定されました。
So, former Prime Minister Kishida cited civil tort as a reason for the dissolution order. This decision was made by him overnight.
さらに、裁判所での解散命令請求審理は閉会審理であり、密室で行われます。国民には公開されません。我々は公開裁判を受ける権利すらないのです。
Furthermore, the hearing of the dissolution order in court is a closed hearing and takes place behind the closed doors. It is not open to the public. We do not even have the right to a public trial.
それで、このままでは全ての宗教団体が解散の危機にさらされるという宗教人の声が上がり始めました。事実、現在日本の信教の自由は風前の灯火なのであります。
So religious people began to speak out because if things continued as they were, all religious organizations would be in danger of being dissolved. Currently, religious freedom in Japan is hanging by a thread.
実際、家庭連合会員への拉致監禁、強制改宗の被害者は4300人以上を数えます。
In fact, more than 4,300 members of the Family Federation have become victims of deprogramming.
ご参席の皆様、日本の民主主義とその基礎である信教の自由は、1945年の第二次大戦の敗戦後、アメリカによってもたらされました。
Distinguished attendees, democracy and religious freedom as its foundation were brought to Japan by the United States after Japan's defeat in World War II in 1945.
その信教の自由が危機に瀕しているのです。80年後の今年、もう一度アメリカから信教の自由を学び、この危機を克服しなければならないと思っています。
That religious freedom is now in danger. I believe that we must overcome this crisis by once again learning about religious freedom from America 80 years later.
皆様のご理解とご支援を得て、日本の信教の自由と民主主義の危機を克服していく決意です。ご清聴ありがとうございました。
With your understanding and support, we are determined to overcome the crisis of religious freedom and democracy in Japan. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
Dinner will now be served.
sometimes we feel good, sometimes.
Ladies and gentlemen, we direct your attention to the video screens for remarks from the 50th Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, the Honorable Newt Gingrich.
First of all, I want to extend my greetings to Ambassador Sam Brownback and Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, who are the co-chairs of the International Religious Freedom Summit. This is a very important time to have this summit. Because the fact is that the assassination of former Prime Minister Abe by somebody who was clearly mentally ill and who was not a member of the church led to a deliberate effort, I think largely driven by the Communist Party in an effort to destroy the political party which had been such a strong bulwark of American and freedom relations. The Liberal Democratic Party had done so much to help Japan. But now, beaten down, attacked, battered, I warned back in November 2022 in the Washington Times that it's clear that the attack on the Family Federation is actually an attack on the Liberal Democratic Party. That's exactly what happened, and it was an effort, frankly, by the communists to create an environment where there could be a closer relationship with China and a more distant relationship with the United States. The government now is in a mess, and the election results were very damaging. So what's happened is that the government has been trying to destroy the Unification Church. It's gone so far beyond the Japanese Constitution. It's found no crimes. It has no basis for what it's doing. And in fact, the U.S. State Department, in its 2023 report in the Biden administration, noted that Japan had deviated from the norm when it decided to dissolve the Family Federation without any proof of any activity that was criminal that had been broken by the church. They just stepped in for political reasons. Now, you don't have to believe America. In 2024, the United Nations Rapporteur on Religious Freedom issued a mandate that the Japanese actions are in violation of the Human Rights Declaration that Japan has signed on to. Your host today, IRF co-chair Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, and Susan Johnson Cook, former State Department Ambassador for Religious Freedom in 2023, wrote, in a move that is much more reminiscent of current practices in China and Russia, Japan's government is now threatening to dissolve a legally constituted religious group for seemingly political purposes. Now, let me be clear. The Biden administration has already condemned this activity. The United Nations has already condemned this activity. And now, with President Trump, we have somebody who is deeply, passionately committed to religious liberty. This is going to have grave consequence for the United States' relationship with Japan and our view of what's happening with Japanese politics. It's very important that Japan remain pro-freedom. It's very important that Japan follow its own constitution. It's very important that Japan remain with America and not allow itself to be gradually overwhelmed by Communist China. This is an important meeting, and I'm honored to have been given a chance to chat with you.
Ladies and gentlemen, due to unforeseen circumstances, Pastor Paula White Kane will be unable to join us tonight. She sends her love and respect to Ambassador Sam Brownback, Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, the Universal Peace Federation, and the Washington Times Foundation. She is in full support of this critical work for religious freedom.
Please welcome our panelists, Attorney Patricia Duval, Human Rights Attorney, Dr. Katrina Lantos Swett, Co-Chair of IRF Summit 2025, Attorney Tatsu Nakayama, Human Rights Attorney, and Attorney Norishige Kondo, Deputy Director of Legal Affairs for the Family Federation of Japan. Moderating our panel is Marco Respinti, Director in charge of Bitter Winter magazine.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this special occasion. We are here focusing on an unprecedented and quite serious fact. The government of a vibrant democracy, Japan, is trying at all costs to dissolve a religious group which has committed no crime. We will now discuss the situation in a spectacular panel, which is my privilege to conduct, made of great speakers. They are Dr. Katrina Lantos Sweat, co-chair of the IRF Summit, Attorney Patricia Duval from France, Attorney Tatsu Nakayama from Japan, and Mr. Norichige Kondo, Deputy Director of Legal Affairs of the Family Federation of Japan. I go directly to Dr. Katrina Lantos Sweat. In 2022, in Real Clear Politics magazine, you wrote, quote, Japan, which has been a beacon of democracy and human rights protection for several decades, has been flirting with the idea of trampling on religious freedom, and a move that is much more reminiscent of practices in Russia and China. Japan's government is now threatening to dissolve a legally constituted religious group for seemingly political reason. This is indeed a very strong and important statement. You also added, quote, dissolving a religious organization that has not been found guilty of any crime would taint the image of Japan as a country committed to democratic principles. Will you elaborate on that comment and share your thoughts?
Absolutely. Well, it's deeply disturbing what Japan is contemplating doing. And if they go forward with this, it will be an enormous stain on Japan's claim to being a liberal constitutional democracy. You know, if they were attempting to do that in this country, they would be laughed out of court. It would be so clearly and uncontestably unconstitutional. And really, if we look at the protections for fundamental religious freedom that Japan has supposedly signed on to, supposedly enshrined in its law, it really should be seen as unlawful in the Japanese context as well. And what we find is this pattern of twisting, laws around fraud, which you referred to try and create a crime that does not exist, to try and create a basis for prosecution that is entirely manufactured. It is not only incredibly unfair, of course, to this community, this wonderful faith community that actually has been a boon and a blessing to Japanese society, but it is deeply undermining of the pillars of what Japan, modern Japan, is supposed to stand for. So I find it very concerning. I appreciated the remarks from former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, citing all of the respected international voices that have spoken out against this, from the United Nations to the Biden administration. And I echo his hope that the Trump administration, which we expect to be very, very strongly pro-religious freedom, is going to use its leverage to let Japan know, don't do this, don't do this. A few years ago, when we had a discussion about this, I said, friends don't let friends drive drunk. And on this issue, Japan is driving its legal and constitutional vehicle right off a cliff. And we hope that they'll pull back onto the road before they make a huge error.
We know Katrina Lantos, Dr. Katrina Lantos, for her clear mind and language, and you just had an example. Thank you so much. Attorney Patricia Duval, I understand you are just back from Japan. What is the current situation of the church there?
The situation of the church, well, I'm going to give you an example of meeting I had in Japan, because I found it very revealing of the situation there. So I met with a church believer and her mother who had had her deprogrammed. So, of course, the mother was very sorry to have been misled into this and to resort to deprogramming, this brutal solution, quote unquote, of deprogramming. And she had been misled by being told that the church that her daughter joined was a criminal organization and that she would become a criminal if she remained in that church. So the whole family gathered and they gave an appointment to the believer to discuss family matters, to discuss the issue of her faith. And what happened was that when she arrived, she was forced into a van with her hands and ankles tied up and taken to a flat where she was locked up and confined for several months with a professional deprogrammer coming in and trying to persuade her that her beliefs were not in conformity with the Bible. So her deprogrammer, his name was Miyamura, was a communist, and he was using Protestant church premises to lecture the parents into deprogramming their children. Now, of course, the talk with the mother and the daughter was very emotional, you can imagine. But it was made possible by the Association of Church Members who are dedicated to restore family relations after deprogramming. So you see, the church believes in family so much that they incite their members, they recommend to their members to try to restore family love even after deprogramming. And this is exactly the opposite of the accusations in the media that the church would destroy families. Actually, it's repairing families from the action of the persons who are trying to have family breakups through the deprogramming. So this is one point. And what I want to say also is that from most of the deprogrammed members, after they accepted to recant their faith, they were brought to lawyers who incited them to sue the church. And this is how they built all the tort cases against the church. And this is the basis on which the government is now requesting dissolution. So it's a very, to answer your question, it's a very critical situation at this point because the dissolution case is in court before the district court in Tokyo, and it's about to decide whether to dissolve the church or not.
Thank you so much, Patricia, for this fresh first-hand report from this beautiful country, which is going in a direction we, of course, don't like. And attorney Tatsunakayama, you're an attorney, you're a legal expert. Does the Family Federation, previously known as the Unification Church in Japan, legally meet the requirements for dissolution that the government is asking? And if not, why it doesn't?
Yeah, simply stated, legally speaking, the Family Federation Japan does not meet the requirement of dissolution at all. The reason being, in a history of 60 years, Family Federation Japan has committed no crime ever. There are some civil tort cases, but it's way back in 30 years ago. What has been going on in Japan after the assassination of former Prime Minister Abe in these 2 years is the wicked political ideological attack from the left. I'll show you how severe, how obnoxious the attack is. You can see this brochure on a table. This skinny guy, Mr. Toru Goto, who is a victim of the deprogramming. Deprogram meaning the kidnap and confine in a separate room. And this gentleman has been confined for 12 years. This is an attack from the left. Thank you.
Yeah, again, thank you so much for your clear words and exposing the political nature, what is going on there, which is very, very sad. Our fourth panelist, Mr. Norichige Kondo, you're also a legal expert. And we just heard and we know that the Japanese government has filed this request for this solution. From the perspective of the rule of law, how should this be judged?
Yes, I believe that the government should be neutral. However, when the media attacked the former Unification Church, the government was too influenced. Firstly, the Prime Minister then proclaimed cutting ties between the LDP, the ruling party, and the former Unification Church. And then the Prime Minister changed the interpretation of requirement for dissolution of a religious group so that the government can dissolve a religious group based on civil torts. I think this is not a rule of law, but a rule of man. This is my opinion.
Thank you so much. Thank you to our panelists because they speak clear language, but also because they stay in time, which is unusual, and I do thank them. So that we have time for a second round of questions, and I want to go back to Patricia Duval. We're here speaking of a violation of religious liberty, which is the violation of the international human rights standards. So to this regard, which is your opinion on this Japanese situation if we keep the international human rights standards in mind?
Well, there has been a new law enacted in Japan in December 2023 on the so-called rescue of victims of the Unification Church. And it provides for legal financial assistance to sue the church, which means that the government is paying, the state is paying attorney fees to to claim a refund and damages. So this is a financial incitement to claim huge amounts. There are actually presently 9 collective claims against the church for millions of dollars, and less than 10% of them represent donations and the rest damages. And donations from decades ago, like they are claiming donations from 20, 40 years. The eldest one is 60 years ago, based on the idea of mental manipulation and infringement of free will. So the people are supposed to not have realized they were victims until they are briefed by the anti-Unification Church lawyer that they have been. So then there is no statute of limitation applied for the church. I mean, the whole system is completely biased. And so what they are actually doing is organizing the plundering of the church assets. So in case they don't get the dissolution in court, they will have anyway made the church disappear by, taking away all the finances and the institutions. And so there's no practice of the religion anymore. So under international law standards, well, Japan has signed the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights and Article 18, and it's supposed to protect religion or belief, and especially minority religions and minority beliefs. And it has a duty of neutrality and protection. So what it is doing right now does not respect those obligations. So Japan, the fact of eliminating one religion from its religious landscape is a violation of this duty, unless there are serious reasons for it, like public order or public safety, which is not the case of Japan, of the Unification Church in Japan. So it cannot, Japan can surely not eliminate the church in the name of public welfare of the majority, or in the name of, or because of an adverse public opinion that it has itself created. So this is really a violation of all those international law standards.
I think it is clear to all of us now that we are facing a gigantic injustice by international standards, and this is threatening because it happens in a democratic country, and it comes from a democratic country. This is even more dreadful. I would like to go back to Attorney Tatsu Nakayama, because he mentioned the assassination, the sad assassination of the former Prime Minister, Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, and I got the impression that the media constructed their presentation of the case, suggesting to the mind of the people and the audience, generally speaking, that the Unification Church Family Federation is responsible for that assassination. Am I right if I say this is totally untrue?
You are, Marco, 100% right in saying that assassination of Prime Minister Abe has nothing to do with Family Federation. One reason, simple reason, is that Family Federation has not investigated as a suspect. So totally, legally speaking, Family Federation is not to blame. But let me touch on this. How come situations like this in Japan, Family Federation is now in danger of dissolution, elimination? As a religious corporation, it's gone forever. Can you imagine? In Japan, democratic country, no crime in 60 years, but now is on the verge of dissolution. I tell you why. It's a scapegoat. In line with the political fight, or the ideological fight to the Family Federation, which was close to LDP, ruling party, Abe. Now, left-wing parties took the advantage of the assassination and using Family Federation as a scapegoat and attacking them. Very severe. Thank you.
I continue with my impression, if you forgive me. Going to Mr. Kondo again. I work as a journalist. By the way, I'm not a spy. Investigating as a journalist this situation, I got the impression that someone maybe fabricated some evidence, maybe even the government. Is this the case?
Absolutely. Actually, nationwide major newspaper Sankei reported about this event. The government submitted written testimonies by so-called victims. However, some of them began to say that the content is not true. So finally, we realized that the government fabricated the content of the written testimony. I think it is outrageous that the government tried to dissolve a religious group based on fabricated evidence.
I have probably my last question for Dr. Katrina Lantos, so I give her the floor also to kind of wrap up and conclude. You have, being the co-chair of the IRF Summit, have an experience quite large on different groups and religions who are attacked, different countries, so on and so forth. We heard that the United Nations rapporteurs on human rights and religious freedom issued a mandate to Japan expressing concern that the country is violating the religious freedom, and it's very important, of the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Family Federation. Again, this is very important, central. Yet this mandate seems not to have affected the government in Japan. I would really like to hear your comment on that, and you have, the final scene.
Well, thank you. And I want to thank my excellent colleagues here on the panel. I think you've laid out sort of the magnitude of the injustice that we're witnessing in Japan very effectively. It is outrageous. And it is, I think, an example of what we would in this country call weaponization of the law, weaponization of justice, weaponization of the media. It is a kind of despicable picking of a target that the powers that be think they can get away with scapegoating, with marginalizing, and with ultimately destroying. And it is a really awful reflection on Japan's commitment to some of the most fundamental values that underlie a strong and democratic society. The rule of law, equal treatment under the law, not weaponizing the government against the community they think they can whip up anger towards. Those should be the crown jewels of a country. And yet in Japan, we see a willingness to abandon all of this in this single-minded desire to attack a faith community. Now, you say they haven't responded to some of the pressure that's been brought to bear upon them. I think that's very, very unfortunate. We are, as all of us know, still in the opening days of a new administration here in this country. And it's been something of a tornado of activity. I think we're all kind of trying to catch our breath because things have been happening in a fast and furious way. But one of the things I think that the new Trump administration is demonstrating is what it looks like when the United States uses its leverage in a maximum way to try and achieve a policy goal. It isn't always diplomatic. It isn't always in accordance with the traditional norms that we're used to, but it has the potential to yield some results. And as someone who is passionate about international religious freedom, somebody who, of course, has admiration for Japan in so many ways, but wants to see Japan pull back from this cliff and get back on the right track, I hope that perhaps the new Trump administration will exert some of that tough leverage with Japan on behalf of religious freedom. We'll say very simply, if this was happening in our country, and Japan's legal system, constitutional system, embrace of democratic norms and international human rights is not that different from what we have here in this country, again, they would be laughed out of court. Some of these practices seem more like suborning perjury or a bill of attainder for our members of the audience who don't know what that is. You can't, under the US Constitution, draft a law that is specifically targeted to entrap and attack and accuse and imprison and convict one individual or one group. That's not lawful. That's not the way a democracy functions. And so Japan is straying into some very dangerous territory, and ultimately most dangerous for Japan itself. It does not want to lose its ability to count itself among those countries that stand for the rule of law, that stand for religious treatment, that stand for equal treatment under the law. So, we're waiting to see who the Trump administration will appoint as the ambassador at large for religious freedom. We are going to hear from Vice President Vance tomorrow at the summit, which is very exciting. And I think Friends of the Family Federation, but more importantly, Friends of Religious Liberty globally, need to reach out to the administration and say, this is wrong. Japan's a friend. Japan's an ally. We can help them do better. And maybe it'll take a little tough love from America to help that happen.
Let us give all of them a big round of applause. They deserve it. And as it was clear, we are admirers and friends of Japan, so we really care for that. So keep your eyes open on the Japanese situation, because that can be crucial. Please.
Marco, I liked your phrase, gigantic injustice is going on in Japan. Thank you for your phrase.
We didn't we didn't make it up before, so thank you. So keep your eyes open on the situation in Japan, because that is crucial for the survival of true democracy, not only in Japan, but all over the West, all over the world. And stay with us for the end of this fantastic program. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our co-chairs, Dr. Katrina Lantos-Sweat, Ambassador Sam Brownback, along with Dr. Michael Jenkins and Congressman Dan Burton for final remarks and conclusion.
Well, we hope you've had a good evening this evening, have had a nice meal, good conversation, good discussion, and had a learning experience here as well. One of the things that I think is really important for us to do and to be about is really this sort of discussion and this building that you have around the tables. So we often don't give enough time to that, but I hope you do take advantage of that even as we finish up this evening here. It's been a wonderful first day. We'll have a really big day and closing tomorrow. There are passionate stories that you're going to hear all through the evening. You've heard them this evening. You hear about these dramatic situations, even in democracies, what's taking place in Japan, which to me is a very troubling thing. We're having enough trouble in the authoritarian parts of the world without having problems in democracies, but you do, and we do. And we're seeing this. We're seeing this in Japan. We see it in India. We're seeing it in other places. And there we've got to push back as well. And we've got to push back strongly on these areas, because if you lose it in these democratic countries, you're going to have even greater problems in other places. And so this is one in Japan in particular that I hope we can really turn around, and I think it would be critical for us to do it, and these not to get ahead of steam in democracies and then see more of them follow that way. So thank you for a wonderful first day. We've got a little signing ceremony here to finish up with this evening, then visit for a little while. Get some rest, because we're going to have a big, strong, hard day finishing tomorrow. It's going to be a good one. Thank you.
Okay, well, I apologize. You're probably getting tired of hearing from me, but I have just a few final thoughts I'd like to share with you. As I think you can tell, I am passionate, all of us are passionate about defending this fundamental right, precisely because we know that it is central to building decent, strong, democratic, pluralistic societies. You know, I like sometimes to use the analogy when talking about religious freedom of a very impressive and very complicated mathematical problem, equation, filling out multiple blackboards. I think I like using this analogy because I myself am not a mathematician, and I'm pretty happy if I can just do a simple 2 + 2, but I admire those who can do these huge equations with all sorts of signs that I don't even know what they stand for. But even though I'm not a mathematician, and I could never solve one of those enormous equations, I know enough to understand that if you make a mistake early in that equation, it does not matter how long and how hard you work on the rest of that problem, you will not get the right answer until you go back and fix the problem early on in the equation. Well, defending, protecting, robustly protecting freedom of religion, conscience, and belief is like getting that big equation right at the beginning. If you do, the rest of what you build will be strong and will stand the test of time. But if you get that early, crucial part of the equation wrong, nothing else you do later on will help you come to the right answer. So we really are talking about a wellspring, foundational right that is precious to each one of us, the right to live our lives in accordance with the dictates of our conscience, and to live in societies that protect that right for us. We want Japan to be that kind of a country. We want every place to be that kind of a country. And as Ambassador Brownback said, it's particularly important when we see erosion and backsliding in democracies that we push back against that, because they set the standard for the rest of the world, and they have to live up to that standard. So thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to the Family Federation and to all those who have made this such a wonderful evening. And I know you're in for another great day tomorrow. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Katrina, and also Ambassador Sam, and this great conference and movement. Congressman Dan Burton is an American treasure. He's one of the strongest leaders I've ever known. And the Washington Post said when he decided not to run again that a lot of Washington is relieved because he made them tremble as the chairman of the Government Oversight Committee. Congressman Dan Burton will give us the opportunity to take action. Congressman Dan.
You know, Mike, I wish my wife was here when you say those nice things. I'd like for her to hear that. She probably would treat me better. Let me just say this is probably one of the most important conferences that I attend because religious freedom is really in peril in many parts of the world. Pakistan, India, China, many parts of the world. Hindus, Christians, Muslims being assaulted. And we have to do something about that, although the world many times just kind of ignores it. And the time goes by and it continues to happen. As Ambassador Sam Brownback, excuse me, Sam, I'll get that right in a minute. Ambassador Sam Brownback, my former colleague in the Congress, said, freedom of religion is for everyone, everywhere, all the time. And that says it all. That says it all. And so today, we're talking about a number of issues, problems in various parts of the world, but I want to focus just a little bit, once again, on Japan, because the things that are happening in Japan is intolerable. It really is. I just want to say a couple of words here. The Japanese government is seeking to dissolve the Family Federation, even though no criminal law has been broken. Jehovah's Witnesses are being persecuted. A UN mandate has been issued raising concerns that Japan is failing to keep its constitutional commitment to uphold religious freedom. And toward that end, every one of you tonight can be a real big help. I mean, you're here anyhow, and you already are a big help. But there's a document on your table that I hope every one of you will sign, which talks about the religious persecution that's taking place in Japan. This document will be used to get the message out to many other people, maybe some more people in our government. Who else? Even the vice president might hear about it tomorrow. But I hope every one of you will sign it and make sure that you tell your friends about it, because religious persecution anywhere in the world has to be stopped. I studied for the ministry many years ago, and I saw it firsthand in many different areas. But I think it's worse now than it has ever been. So you folks are really important. You're really needed, every single one of you, and I hope you'll all sign this tonight. Thank you very much.
Congressman Burton, now we would like to have a signing of the impact statement calling for the effort to help Japan overcome the religious freedom crisis that it's facing. So I'd like to ask Ambassador Brownback and Dr. Sweat and the religious leaders to come forward. And Ambassador Brownback has already given his name to this declaration, and so has Katrina, but we'd like you to sign it symbolically again.
Yes.
And we'd like to have also Dr. Tanaka. Religious leaders, you come from that side, and go ahead. Yeah, right here. Go ahead. All of our speakers should be here. Thank you. Go ahead. Sam, if you and Katrina could start. And Mr. Tanaka, you go next. Oh.
Don't just watch us up here, but sign at your tables as well.
Forms, it's on your table.
So everyone, we'd like to gather now for a final photo together.
Well, am I supposed to
go ahead? Yeah, sure.
Thanks. Well, thank you. Very colorful.
I'd like to ask Ambassador Brownback if you would stand, and we'll continue signing after the photo. A couple more, right? Our panel. Great. Thank you, Congressman.
Yes, sir.
All right. Sign. Okay. Ambassador Brownback, if you could kindly come with Dr. Katrina and stand on both sides of this declaration. Human rights and religious freedom impact statements. And everyone will get a chance to sign. If you didn't, we'd like to just get together. Mr. Tanaka, right here, okay. Congressman Burton.
Sir.
Come stand next to then everybody, Tatsu Nakayama, please come stand right next to Naka. Let's make a line, nice line. Some of the leaders can go to the other side. Go ahead. Come and stay here. Stay here. Marco, if you can come up front here. And also, Dr. Duvall, stay here. Thank you. All right. This is getting you. Okay. How's it look? Is it beautiful? All right, let's thank God for all his mercy and his love, and that we want to come together with all faiths. That's why we have our religious leaders here from all faiths. We want to join together as a family, and we want to work together with God's blessing to really bring religious freedom to everyone. We want to fight for you, whatever your troubles are or challenges are. I want to thank Dr. Moon, who founded the Washington Times Foundation and the Universal Peace Federation. And we want to thank also, again, Ambassador Sam Brownback and Dr. Katrina Lantos Sweat. They are not only working at the time of the summit, but it's every week of the year. They're advancing the cause of religious freedom for all people. I'd like to have a rousing round of applause for all that are here today. All of you, all of our partners. Without the partners, we can't go forward. Thank you to all the partner organizations. Thank you, Rabbi. I'm so happy to see you. Shanti, Shanti to our Hindu and Buddhist leaders. God bless you. Thank you, IRF Summit.